Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It's Groundhog's Day. That's right. And the question I've got, if Trump sees his shadow, will we have 6 more years of treason? Maybe. If an anti-vaxxer sees their shadow, 6 more years of COVID. I'm not quite sure, but it is Groundhog's Day. And, well, if you stop and you look back, and this is one of those things that's really interesting to me. The economy doing really, really well. In fact, the numbers doing really well. 5.7% for the full year. Do you remember? And this is again why I think this is an interesting day to remember. Much like the movie The Same Day coming over and over again. When Trump had his best year. And that was 1 quarter growth of 3%. He was like, hey, we're back. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. Look what we've done. Look what we've accomplished. And it's all in how the message is presented. And look, on a certain level, you got to give Trump credit. He's always the eternal optimist. Even when everything is burning down, the country is under attack. Well, granted, he led the attack. But, even then, look at my people fighting for me. Always the sunny optimist. Democrats, not so much. And I think Democrats need to take a little lesson in that. And they need to, say, look, things are good. We're getting things done. We're moving forward. But yeah, all just one of those things for the day. But again, if Trump does see a shadow, does that mean more treason? Maybe so. Second time this week that the the historically black colleges and universities have been under siege. And I'm not quite sure why this now. I think a lot of it has to do with Biden saying that he's going to appoint a black woman on the Supreme Court. I think that made some of the crazy people a little crazier. And at least 16 historically black colleges and universities here in this country have received bomb threats. And that happened on Tuesday. Now, fortunately, they have not found any bombs, fortunately. And I'm not challenging them to do it. But this is one of those things where you go, what's the purpose in this? Terror. These are terrorists. And we should be hunting down these terrorists and holding them accountable and throwing them in a dark place. This is wrong on any level, and anyone who would do this should be outed. They should be publicly shamed. They should be publicly dealt with, and dealt with harshly. Just my thoughts. I had to get that out there because I saw this. I'm going, this is not who we are, or maybe sadly, it's who some of us are. And those are the people we got to deal with. Some good news, and let's go to some good news. Some good news, at least 54 Starbucks have filed for union elections. 54 of them around the country, out of that one little campaign in Buffalo. And I remember at the time going, gee, you wonder why Starbucks, this giant multi-state, huge conglomerate, is fighting so much in the little town there of Buffalo, where three places were saying, hey, we'd like to have some respect. You wondered why they sent out the former CEO, why they had executives out there, sweeping floors and, patting people on the back and, hey, we're partners. Partner. Granted, I make $170,000 a year and you make barely over minimum wage, but hey, we're still partners. And the thing about partners, generally partners have some bit of, some bit of equality, some bit of a, similarity, some bit of, some say in that place. As where the people who actually do the work, not so much, which is why they voted for a union there in Buffalo. Now 54 of them across the country are jumping into this. And I'm, about time people go, yeah, we do need to have some bit of voice. So good for them. Also, our friends over at the Center for American Progress who we have on the program quite often. Our friends over there are in the middle of a contract negotiations right now. I'm wishing them the best, hoping all of their issues get addressed. The sad thing is, though, the floor, the salary floor there is like 40 grand. And you go, wow, that's a lot of money. No, not in Washington, D.C. That's one of those things where you've got to go to all of the congressional events, and you've got to go to all of the, all of the get-togethers, because you got to steal the crackers. This is one of those things. And I've had congressional staffers who, evidently something like 13% of them make less than the poverty rate, and a number of them are on the verge of homelessness, which is why, interestingly enough, only wealthy people get to send their kids to be those kind of interns. We got to do better. Got to do better. And this administration should be the administration that does that. Now, my big anger of the day. Joe Biden ran on the Build Back Better idea. And look, I'm a fan of what he's doing. I've said from the beginning he's the most pro-union president of my lifetime. The fact that he fired Peter Robb on day one, who was the general counsel at the NLRB, that made me very happy, considering Peter Robb's past as a union buster behind what happened during the Reagan years with Patco and the firing of the Patco workers. Happy to see that. Happy to see his number two go. And a lot of the things that Biden's been able to do through executive orders, happy with. Wish we could get some legislation. Wish we could do that quickly. Wish we had 50 Democrats on the same page. But one of the things that President Biden said is we're going to buy American, we're going to build American, and we're going to build union. And I point to this story that our friend Stephen Greenhouse wrote. Evidently, this company, Oshkosh Defense, they won a giant contract, massive contract to build the next generation of new postal vehicles. About 165,000 of them over the next decade. They're saying somewhere around, somewhere in excess of $10 billion this contract's going to be. And the idea is that it's going to create 1,000 jobs. And this is where some people are kind of upset. Oshkosh Defense has several factories, several facilities, all in the state of Wisconsin. And this is one of those things where you go, they got the contract, they made the bid, and part of that bidding process was the fact that this is a company that has been unionized for, well, virtually ever. This is a company that's been around for years, and since I think they've been a union company since like 1938. I mean, we're talking long-standing, good relationship, with the community. With that, this would be the perfect place. This would be the perfect place for Biden's Build Back Better plan to be put into place. This would be the shining example of living what he wanted laid out. An American company who kept manufacturing here through the hard times, stayed in Wisconsin, kept those jobs, union jobs, while others were trying to do other things. This would have been a great story. Winning this big contract because of their record, because of their solid stance in the community, and all of that stuff. All of that flowery kind of stuff that you see on documentaries and on sales brochures. It was going to be great. This was going to be the example, the shining star of how we're going to rebuild America, how we're going to remanufacture, how we're going to reshore, how we're going to rebuild the American middle class. This was going to be great. It was going to be fabulous. These were going to be 1,000 new union jobs, good family-sustaining wages, health security, retirement security, good quality jobs, the kind that are careers, the kind that aren't just, you go to work, punch a clock, and, whatever. These are career jobs. These are skilled career jobs. It was set. The model was being set. Except the company decided, well, we're going to evaluate some locations. We're going to look around. And what they thought that meant was, of their 7 locations within the state of the several places they've got here in the U.S., all in Wisconsin, they would choose one of those in Wisconsin. I guess this is where contract language matters, because evidently the company Oshkosh Defense, they decided, well, we should go looking in other places. We got this more than $10 billion contract. Let's see if we can cheat people out of wages. Let's see if we can get lower labor costs, so we can do what? Oh yeah, line our pockets and feed the shareholders. So what they did is, like all union busting companies, think Boeing, they decided, well, we're gonna go look around, which led them to South Carolina. South Carolina, with its 1.8% union density rate, one of the lowest wage states in the country. Evidently, there was a former Rite Aid warehouse that was just perfect. In fact, Oshkosh Defense called it, a turnkey plant that they could ramp up production immediately, and it was going to be great. Because evidently, according to them, South Carolina's got the best skilled workforce. Now, the only assembly plant that makes cars in South Carolina is the BMW plant in this area. And you go, well, I don't know how many people they've trained, but I don't know that you're going to get better than what you had in Wisconsin. What you're going to get is cheaper. And this is, again, another way to fleece the American taxpayer, because with cheaper labor comes shoddier products. We know this. We've lived this. We've seen it. It is what it is. So now the Postal Service is under kind of pressure, because everyone's going, hey, this isn't what this was supposed to be. Now the Postal Service, they came out and said, hey, wait a second. We followed the guidelines, had to be made in the U.S., and this is, we follow the guidelines, this is what it is. So people in Wisconsin, and I'll add my name to the list, not in Wisconsin, but I'll add my name to the list of people reaching out to President Biden saying, you got to do something about this. This was not the plan. This was not the way forward. This is not the shining example that we need on how we're going to rebuild the middle class and rebuild the working class of this country into one of a prosperous one. Tammy Baldwin, the senator from there, said Oshkosh Defense has a history of manufacturing trucks for the government service in Wisconsin with skilled union labor, so I remain deeply concerned that they decided to manufacture postal trucks where it appears to be a newly acquired facility with inexperienced, likely non-union hires in South Carolina. She says, I want these trucks made in Wisconsin. And I don't blame her, because again, if you go back to what the president was throwing out there, and I agree with, and I am 100% behind. We want to build in America. We want to build in the U.S. first and foremost, and we want union jobs. And this is where government procurement matters. This is where policy ideas matter. We can rebuild manufacturing in this country. We can do it immediately. We can bring all those jobs back from China, all kinds of stuff, and just pay Chinese wages. We can employ everyone. Now understand, Republicans will tell you there are a number of them out there, so we don't need a minimum wage. If people are hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages in horrible conditions, let them do it. It's their liberty. It's their freedom. It's their choice. They've chose to work for $1 an hour. So if people are, like I said, hungry enough and desperate enough, oh boy, the CEO class, who has never been happier, it would be even happier, because, that pesky minimum wage. And this is another one of those examples of for me anyway, of an opportunity. And I'm hoping it doesn't go missed, because we should be rebuilding our manufacturing. We should rebuild the nation, but we should be doing it in a way that raises everyone up, that doesn't just fatten the bottom line, but that actually helps support families. And this is one of those things where political stuff matters. I look at the Republicans running around right now saying, look at the infrastructure we're bringing back to the district, taking credit for an infrastructure bill that they didn't vote for. This kind of thing. The representatives in South Carolina going, look what we brought for you, when they had nothing to do with it. And, I've often said, politics is a blood sport. There's some to the victor goes the spoils. One of the things that I've kind of admired about Joe Biden is that he didn't punish red states. He didn't punish anyone who didn't vote for him like the former guy did. But there's part of me that goes, at some level, don't you have to? On some level, don't you have to make, places that supported you better off? I mean, they didn't get any Republican votes for the infrastructure. None. In a functional democracy, in a functional system, you would have Republicans voting for this stuff because it means investment. But none of them did. So it's always been my view that if you didn't vote for it, you don't get it. If I'm your representative and I don't fight for you and I don't bring anything back and I don't do the job that you need me to do, eventually you're going to throw me out and get somebody who will do what you need to do. That is a functional system. The one we currently have, you have people who voted against all of this, all of the infrastructure, all of the rescue plan, all of the things that have gone on, and more. And they're not afraid of being held accountable because they're able to go back to their districts and go, yeah, sure, I voted against it, but look, it's back here anyway. Look what I was able to do. So if I've got something for the president, you got to get involved in this. This cannot happen. This cannot be how we build back better. To me, building back better is raising the conditions, raising the wages, raising the environment for working people. And I fear this does not do that. Now you say, but Rick, now you're pitting states against each other. Exactly what Republicans have been doing for the longest time. But Rick, we're better than that. Yeah, but at some level, you've got to use policy to raise the floor. And for me, that's what it is. It's about raising that floor. If we continue the race to the bottom, we all eventually end up on the bottom, don't we? At least that's my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program podcast, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Share it with your friends, all of that. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. That's all.
Over 70 years of experience in heart and aviation, the members of the Association of Flight Attendants know the realities of the aircraft cabin better than anyone. We don't just serve drinks, we save lives. We don't just negotiate contracts, we move major policy issues like the smoking ban, no knives on planes, clean water, and safe food on board. The air we breathe matters, and we stop the spraying of poisonous pesticides. Training, rest, and no calls on planes matter as we fight fires, de-escalate conflict, revive, and breathe life. We safely usher passengers to the big business deal, the family vacation, the times of celebration, times of grief, and times of battle. We are aviation's first responders, and we are the last line of defense in aviation security. We are the first impression and the smile of aviation, connecting the people of our nations. Fly with us, partner with us, make progress with us. The Association of Flight Attendants. Stronger together, better together.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Quote of the day. And, the more I find out about Adam Kinzinger, the more I kind of like him. It's sad he's not going to be around. But he said, I hate to be so personal, but Josh Hawley is one of the worst human beings and a self-aggrandizing con artist. He said, when Trump goes down, I certainly hope this evil will be laid in the open for all to see and be ashamed of. And what he's talking about is, and this is amazing to me. I guess I grew up during the Cold War, and the idea that the Republican Party would be on the side of Putin and the Russian government it doesn't sit right with me. But evidently this is what he's saying. Basically, let Ukraine go. Let them be on their own. Walk away from them. and well, let Putin do what he wants. I struggle with that, and I think Jen Psaki was right. He should be. It's disgusting that he's basically parroting Russian talking points, and I'm still struggling with how the Republican Party got that far off of the beaten path. And here to share some thoughts on, well, maybe how that happened and if there's any hope. I've asked Jeff Timmer to come talk with us. Jeff is a political strategist, senior advisor with the Lincoln Project, also co-founder of Republicans and Independents for Biden, also the co-host of a fabulous podcast, A Republican Podcast One. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look on how to get to that. But Jeff, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thanks, Rick. It's very nice to be here. And, where the Republican Party is today, is just, it blows my mind, having grown up in the Republican Party, having worked in the Republican Party for 30 years, having directed and led the Michigan Republican Party, watching these Republicans, or so-called Republicans, parrot the talking points of the Kremlin. The party that helped win the Cold War is dead and gone, and it's been replaced by these fraudulent imposters, people like Josh Hawley, who have no conviction, who stand for nothing, who don't understand what America stood for, and it's horrible to watch, and it's frightening to think that they're that close to coming back into power.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary, but you think about the Republicans love to throw Ronald Reagan out as the sainted one and all of that. And I've said a number of times, Reagan is nowhere recognizable in this party. The fact that the person who's given credit for bringing down the wall and the fall of communism and all of that, to now have that same party siding with Vladimir Putin, I struggle with that. I think there are some Republicans that do too.
There are, and Kinzinger's a great example. And there's a lot of Republicans who cravenly and cowardly sit by and watch this all happen, afraid to say anything because they think it will cost them. They think it will cost them their position of power, their chairmanship, or their role in the party. And if these people today who are elected or who are serving as Republicans around the country had been in charge during the 70s and 80s, the wall never would have come down. The Soviet Union would have never been defeated because these people stand for nothing.
Well, I don't know about that. They stand for tax cuts. We gave tax cuts to the very wealthy. They stand for Trump being reinstalled as president. There's some things they value. They're just not American values. They're just not democratic values.
Right. Yeah. And democracy with a small d, they're against that too. And so, the fact of the matter is now we have two kinds of people in this country. We have Republicans and we have Americans. And that's where we stand today.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the messaging that I've been trying to get my Democratic friends to come around to. The reality is, in this moment, the boat's on fire, and we better all be grabbing buckets because it's democracy or not. Do you believe in institutions and the rule of law, or do you not? That seems to be a very simple choice. Could even fit on a bumper sticker.
It could, but then I watch the congressional Democrats play their baseball game, annual baseball game with the Republicans and pretend everything's normal like it used to be. Those are the kinds of things that people need to wake up and realize the game has fundamentally changed, and the Republicans they're not just playing by different rules. They're taking the game board, tipping it over, and eating the pieces.
I'm actually speechless because I couldn't have said it better myself. You're dealing with people who are willing to burn the house down, which is why I think Adam Kinzinger came out and said, look, we have to have some uneasy alliances. And I've talked about this for, now a long time. We've had Joe Walsh on the program numerous times over the last couple of years. And, if you would have told me in 2010, 11, 12 that I would be friendly with Joe Walsh and fighting in the same direction, I'd have told you were crazy. But here we are. We agree on nothing policy-wise except the fact that we believe in democracy and we believe in the rule of law. And that's enough to bring us together. So I'm guessing, that would be an example of his uneasy alliances that Kinzinger's talking about.
No, definitely. And it was so refreshing to see Kinzinger say what he really thinks about Josh Hawley, because it's so rare in politics that people actually say what they think. And there's people think that about Ted Cruz, they think that about Josh Hawley. It was great to hear. And the fact of the matter is, we are at a point where it doesn't matter that we used to be partisan opponents when things were normal, that we disagreed on what marginal tax rates were or should be back in 2012. I get people coming at me all the time from the left saying, but you helped create this. Okay, but what are we going to do about it now? I can't go back and change what I did in 2012. I can only go forward and change what we're going to do in 2022. And that's fight for the soul of this country.
Which is why I didn't bring that up to you. I mean, to be honest, it's one of those questions that everyone goes, well, you're responsible, and we want to hang this around someone's neck. And I'm going, no, Jeff, your sins are going to be forgotten for now. We got work to do. Let's move forward. We can bicker about that other stuff later when we're not worrying about a dictator in the White House with the largest military basically in history at his disposal. I think that's a little more pressing.
Well, definitely. And, I'm not looking to somehow get Republicans back into power down the road. So I don't somehow think they're going to suddenly pivot and, that there's any way that they can be redeemed. The Lincoln Project isn't looking to now go out in 2026 or 2028 and start electing Republicans again. Those days are done. This party, as we knew it, the party that we grew up in, that's dead. And it's gone. Someday there will be a stable center right again in this country, but it's not going to be for a long time.
Yeah. Now I get the same kind of messaging from the left, that the Democratic Party is just as bad. We should abolish both of them. This kind of both sidesism that we get all the time. Is there any redemption for the Democratic Party, do you think? Because look, I think you're right. I think the Republicans are beyond redemption. What about the Democrats, for those who are out there thinking, well, the Democrats are just as bad?
Well, I think they need to wake up and recognize what's at stake here. This isn't about whether or not you agree with what they're doing on policy, whether they're going far enough. It has nothing to do with policy. We're not going to have the luxury of debating whether or not we should forgive student loans, or whether or not we should expand Medicaid, Medicare. We're not going to be able to have those debates if we're not allowed to vote, if democracy disappears. And it's not sensational, it's not hyperbolic to say that is possible. Look at where we've come and how quickly we've got here, how far we've moved in just the last 5 years, to a point where we now have one major party who just refuses to accept the outcome of elections. And there's 70 million people who go along with that. We are hanging by a thread here, and we have to defeat them, or they're going to destroy us.
And this is where my frustration is.
I mean,
and you hit it on it a second ago, that they're going to go play baseball together. Joe Manchin's having parties with with Republicans and doing all this stuff, and I'm going, if it is as we're saying, and I believe it is. I don't believe you're being hyperbolic. I believe the rule of law is under attack. I believe 230 plus years of history is under attack. How come we're not seeing that out of the Democrats? And that's what the message is. Why aren't we seeing that sense of urgency that you and I think both feel? I think the average voter is asking that question.
Well, I think we're starting to see some good signs of it. I mean, we're seeing, I think, more focused rhetoric coming out of the White House, out of the January 6th committee in the House. I think those we have to recognize they're moving slower than I think all of those of us who realize what has transpired, the depth and the breadth of the crimes and the people involved would like to see. But if they're going to prosecute this case, if they're going to be turning over evidence to the DOJ, if the DOJ is doing their job, they've got to make sure that they hit this out of the park. They can't go out and start arresting Republicans, arresting Trump, arresting those involved in January 6th until they've got an airtight case that's going to stand up in a court of law. Because if they swing and miss, it's all over too.
No, you're absolutely right. But I keep coming back to, and maybe this is just me looking at the Republicans and how masterful you guys used to be in messaging, and how masterful they really are in the media machine that they control. This stuff should have been done last year. We should be much further down the road. And I know if the Republicans were doing this, and I look at the Benghazi hearings, it's all we would be hearing about.
I agree. I mean, I look back and think of all the times I've screamed at my TV and screamed at my screen and screamed on Twitter over the last year about what are we doing? Why are we talking about this? Because we need to be elevating the urgency, nationalizing this election. This is if the Democrats fight this election on the terms of that they would in a normal off-year election, where all try to localize each race and pretend that this bigger picture attack on democracy itself isn't happening, we're in for a world of hurt. They've got to wake up. They've got to nationalize this election around the principle of democracy. It's the only thing that's going to forestall the Republicans from getting at least one of the chambers in Washington back, and then it's going to be mayhem for the last 2 years of President Biden's first term.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Jeff Timmer. Jeff is a political strategist, senior advisor with the Lincoln Project, co-founder of Republicans and Independents for Biden, also the co-host of a Republic podcast, where you can get all your podcasts. Look for that. We'll get links out on social media how you can do it. Now, Donald Trump, called Lindsey Graham a rhino. The guy who basically had his head up Trump's butt the whole time he was in office is now being attacked because he had the audacity to say pardoning the January 6th rioters would be inappropriate. Now under the bus. Does this matter to any of his supporters?
No, it doesn't. The loyalty is a one-way street. Trump has none toward any of the sycophants who've been, humping his shin for, as long as he's been in office, or now since he's left office. And somebody like Lindsey Graham, Trump says, calls him a rhino. Lindsey gets all anxious and stressed and pees on the carpet for a couple days, but he'll be back down at Mar-a-Lago. He'll be playing golf and sucking up and saying I didn't really mean it, and Trump will give him a couple noogies on his head, and I don't know, make him play golf without pants or something to so that he feels chastened. But Lindsey will be back there looking for the love.
I'm sorry, but I've got that image in my head, and I can't unsee that. That is just not, and you've broken my wife. She can't now unsee it. Now the next part I was going to go into was the weird thing is that people put up with this. I look at the Ted Cruz's, I look at the Grahams, and they put up with it because evidently there's this belief that the base is so powerful. But yet I'm looking at some of the fundraising numbers, and the people that Trump has backed, their fundraising is lagging behind, even as the Republicans that are running for office are getting much more extreme. What do you make of that?
Well, he's getting behind and endorsing these I don't know, outright kooks who have no political skills, who have no political networks, and so this fundraising is a new thing for them. What isn't, I guess, factored in yet is the value, the what they're going to realize from Trump's support and endorsement in many of these primaries. And then in red states, in safe Republican primaries, the endorsement of Trump could be enough to overcome the traditional fundraising structure of the establishment Republicans, to use the term that they would apply. It may be enough, but everyone, they like to point to, we'll recreate the Glenn Youngkin model. You can't recreate Glenn Youngkin when you've got these candidates with three eyes. They're the Star Wars Cantina characters, and that's who the Republicans are going to be nominating in these states like Michigan and Arizona and Pennsylvania and Georgia. And
hopefully every one of those states don't nominate someone like Terry McAuliffe, who I thought ran just a poor campaign and did all the wrong things at the wrong time. So I'm hoping that is, but recently we talked with Joe Trippi, who's a Democratic strategist, and he was saying that he's hopeful that the Democrats aren't going to lose because Republicans have gone off the deep end. And I'm going, yeah, I don't know. I think they've gone off the deep end already. I don't know how much further off the quote unquote deep end they can go when the Confederate flag is marched through our Capitol, and that doesn't send the country into a collective bit of insanity, wanting blood. I don't know what else does, though.
Yeah, when the news breaks over the weekend that there was the second memo, that there was plots to seize the voting machines, seize the ballots, have the military effectively help install Trump in a second term, even though he had clearly lost the election. And that's not the biggest news story of the day. Everyone's up Monday morning going, "Hey, Tom Brady retired." I don't know. How do we get past that? Apathy is the enemy of democracy, and we've got to wake people up, or we don't deserve to have what we've had here in this country, and we need to make an exfil plan.
Yeah.
Head to Canada.
You're spot on. I actually just tweeted that out yesterday. Look, division's a problem, but apathy is a much bigger problem, because you don't have people who are I don't think outraged enough in this moment. Now, here's the other part of this, and I think I learned this in 2011 when they tried to recall Scott Walker. People are just tired of being inundated with all of this insanity. They just want to go back to their lives, and they've written off politics, which is a win for people like Trump, and I would argue, people like the Republicans.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, their apathy is, they can make the noise go away, the constant deluge, when the government takes over all the airwaves and you have people, jackbooting, goose stepping down the main streets of the country. Then they can, not worry about politics. It's going to be too late, clearly, at that point.
Yeah.
But we've got to make people care more about who wins these elections than who wins American Idol.
Last question, about 20 seconds. The Democrats got a chance? Do you think it's possible they hold on to one or both chambers?
I absolutely do. I think the cake is far from baked. There's so many things that can happen with COVID, with the economy, with international, with what's going on in Ukraine. There's so many things that can change the trajectory of this race.
Good stuff, Jeff. I appreciate the time.
Sure.
I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
I hope to, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff, Jeff Timmer. Political strategist, senior advisor there with the Lincoln Project. Remember, check out his podcast, A Republic Podcast. We'll get links out on social media. How you can do that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It doesn't happen like we think it does. No one rolls the tanks. No armies meet in pitched battle. It happens quietly, little by little. And because so many think it can't happen, it does happen. Little by little, the rules change. It doesn't seem shocking or sudden. And that's the point. Fewer places to vote, longer lines. Don't worry, they say. We're just improving the system. They hope we won't notice the rules are changing because they lost the last election. They hope we just won't care enough to stop them. They believe they can take America away from us, and we won't even notice. We know who they are. We know what they want. The question is, who are we? Do we let them get away with it, or do we fight? Democracy is on the ballot. Vote while your vote still counts. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So ever since we had the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh, a lot of talk about infrastructure, a lot of talk about the state's failure to invest in infrastructure, something I've been talking about for, all 17 years of me doing this. The fact that we've needing to invest in better roads, bridges, in our infrastructure, better airports, waterways, all of that stuff. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers keeps reminding us we're failing. We're failing on so many levels. And even the $1.2 trillion, the historic $1.2 trillion, is only a third of what we actually needed. Let me check the watch again. 2 years ago. So we got a lot to do. But here's the thing. We're going to get that bridge in Pittsburgh fixed. My hope is at some point, and I know this is just me hoping and wishing, I hope we fix things before they collapse. Because can you imagine being on a city bus that goes 150 feet down into a ravine and having to have a human chain of people to get you out? Yeah, me neither. Which is why I'd prefer not to do it. And here to share some thoughts on infrastructure, the need for better and more infrastructure. I've asked our good friend Austin Kaiser to come talk with us. Austin is the assistant to the president of government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. Austin, thanks for taking time for us.
I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So, are we on the same page? We would like to have infrastructure that we repair before it collapses. Maybe just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It doesn't just need repaired. A lot of it needs just upgraded so that it can be efficient and useful in the society we live in today instead of what it was 70 years ago. So, we think transmission lines and electrical infrastructure, a lot of it's still functioning at the level that it needed to function at a long, long time ago, but without significant upgrades. And we're not going to be able to support the new industries of the future. We're not going to be able to support electric vehicle infrastructure. So tons of build out need to happen, tons of upgrades need to happen. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we watched our infrastructure basically disintegrate before our eyes, like a third world country in many places. And I look at my coastal areas and other areas that are affected by extreme weather events that are sort of the worst effects of climate change. We have to do things like raise infrastructure out of the floodplains.
Yep.
And so these are massive investments, and there are a lot of jobs here too, right? So they can drive the economy at the same time. And we just seem to be, people like to bury their head in the sand and pretend like we don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, before we go any further, I want to throw a quick shout out to your members because the Northeast just got slammed with a big bomb storm or whatever they were calling it. And your members were out there keeping the power on. And I want people to remember that it's the IBEW members who are out there stringing those lines and fixing things in the worst possible weather to make sure that you don't freeze in your homes. So quick shout out to you guys and the folks who actually did that, because I know I got friends who live up that way. It was brutal.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, people forget they're the first of the first responders. There's a major event. They got to go in and get electricity back on. They've got to get critical infrastructure like hospitals and nursing homes and other things up and running, pumps, all sorts of things to keep cities from flooding. They're usually the first ones in, even before the National Guard and local law enforcement will go in and rescue sometimes, especially in flood areas. They need to make sure the water's not energized. So first guys in, and they live down there in their trucks for weeks and are up and, like you talked about New England and major winter events. They're sleeping in their trucks if they're sleeping at all, working around the clock to get things back up and running.
And this is where I come back to Austin, going, the infrastructure bill was great. $1.2 trillion is a good start. And I know a lot of people, this is the end of the road. No, to me, this is a start. Because as I said, the American Society of Civil Engineers said 2 years ago that we needed 3 times this amount just to get to even. Not to get to the point to where my grandparents' generation fought for, which was at the edge of technology and getting to the extent of possible. We're just saying we just want to be even. So we're not looking at getting A's anymore. We're looking at B minus. We're okay with that. For me, I think we want to go further. And then on the electrical part of this, we shouldn't have your guys having to live in trucks in horrible weather. We should be investing the kind of infrastructure that we need, because these storms are coming. And in places like Texas, things are going to get worse. And with climate change coming on, it's going to get even worse. So we need to be redoing all of this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole show like on Puerto Rico or the coasts in Florida and what's happening there. But yeah, no, we have to invest in a real way, but we also have to think about we're talking about transmission lines and some of that infrastructure, but our power plants and our energy generation is a major issue here too. And you talk about the money, it's not enough to completely upgrade everything. It's a big chunk, and I think it's as far as Biden can get folks to go right now. We're hoping to double down on a little bit with the Build Back Better agenda, but we're in a little bit of a deadlock there.
But in talking about moving forward and doing this stuff. And I've been talking about the electric vehicles and I've been talking about all of the changes that are happening in the auto industry and in other industries where we have to have this just transition. You look at these power plants that we're closing, the coal fire ones, these that are in communities that were mainstay job creators that brought power in. We've got to figure out how, while moving away from the past stuff, to make sure that people have a just transition, that they don't their lives don't become worse, that things aren't dumped at their doorstep as we've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, it all ties together, right? This whole economy is pretty intertwined, and energy is actually the largest part of the economy, and it's a big deal. So if you take these communities, and I'm going to give just a very direct example. So I come from a town called Portsmouth, Ohio, in a county called Scioto County, Ohio. It's in southeast Ohio. It's tucked in the hills, beautiful country down there.
I know where it is.
The entire economy is driven by coal-fired power plants, coal country, right? Even though there's not many coal mines left in that area, still all the plants are coal-fired. It was the biggest train yard, Norfolk and Southern Yard, between New York and Chicago. When I was a kid, right? Barge traffic, we call it coal barges. It's barge traffic though, up and down the Ohio River, moving. And we had a major steel mill that was mostly coal-fired, coal-blasted coking facilities where they treat the coal, then using the blast furnaces. And all those are gone now, right? All of them are gone, and we get it, right? Benzene was a major polluter. There's all sorts of things that were happening. AEP and others made decisions to offload coal out of their assets because of power purchase agreements, arrangements, the Ohio Clean Air Authority, all sorts of complex, matrix of public policy. But what nobody thought about it was what they were going to do to the communities when they shut these jobs down. They thought environment only, and what we have to realize is that two things can be true at the same time. Correct. The environment needs cleaned up, and good jobs have to exist. And because abject poverty kills as many, if not more people than the pollution does, right? Now, the pollution's, a little it's hard to reverse, but so is poverty, especially when we get into generational poverty. So now we took a community that was all union jobs. These guys are making, very, very good money. They're driving the economy. The town was booming. When I was a kid, it was solid middle class. Now it's absolutely decimated. It looks like a third world country, right? And you talk about infrastructure. The people who are left behind without jobs can't afford to maintain the infrastructure they have. They can't maintain the mileage of sewer lines underneath their streets. The tax base just isn't there anymore. And their bonded indebtedness is so high that they can't borrow money anymore, right? So without this infusion coming from the infrastructure plan, they can't even do the basic necessities of fixing a busted sewer line under their streets on many occasions. Sometimes it takes them weeks to get done what they used to do in a night. And it's just totally decimated. But now the biggest job creators, the biggest employers are in that community now?
I would assume Walmart.
No, it's a hospital that's growing in a town that's shrinking because the opioid epidemic, just all the ills of poverty, just drive at that community, and it cause all sorts of social ills. So you have the hospital. You have the drug rehabilitation clinic that was a very small little nonprofit when I was there. I actually served on the board on it for a while. Now is the second largest employer in that community. They're buying up old factories to put beds in them for inpatient treatment centers. And the third is the state prison. They weren't even close to the top employers when I was a kid. And so we have to recognize that if we destroy communities, what we leave behind is things that are going to collapse. I mean, you can't have sewage systems rotting under streets either, right? So, it's one thing to come in heavy, say it's polluting, shut it down. But without alternatives and without other ways to drive the economy, you're leaving behind just absolute devastation. And that's what we wrestle with every day because we're not climate deniers at all, right? I mean, you just heard me talking about the worst effects of climate change. Right. We totally recognize it. But what we don't always agree on is how we practically fix it, because it's also true when you start offline a bunch of baseload coal-fired power plants. I love solar and wind. Like we're happy to build solar and wind, right? We've been training in it for decades, but it's still a fact that only 5% of the bulk power in this country is solar power, and it's going to take a long, long time to scale up, and also to figure out how it works in a place where you have a major snowstorm in like Boston, to where you get snow piled up on solar panels and you can't even get in there to clear them off and start generating electricity again. It's hard enough just to keep the power lines healthy enough to deliver the electricity without having to worry about the generation sources. So, there's some real economic, but also practical problems with how we generate power and deliver it. And so we have to switch to things that are true baseload power to complement it. Without things like nuclear power, solar and wind will never reach their full potential. It's impossible to do. They're intermittent power sources. They're good power sources when they're working well, but they're intermittent. They also need something like nuclear, coal, natural gas cleaned up, right? And I know, understand, the argument between there's no such thing as clean coal, right? But there's carbon capture technologies now that can pretty much take it down to no emissions. And I'm not saying all coal plants. I don't think you'll see another major coal plant built in the United States ever.
Probably not. No, you're right. You're
But
listening to
there
the
are
Rick
some.
Smith Show. We're here with Austin Kaiser. Austin's the assistant to the president for government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. You want to check out their website, ibew.org. In talking about this, and I'm 100% with you, because I witnessed, and I think as a country, we witnessed all of the ill effects of something going away. We all lived through deindustrialization of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I remember those steel mill jobs, those auto worker jobs, those jobs that were the bedrock of a middle class just evaporate. And with it came all of the negatives that you're talking about: alcoholism, drug use, domestic violence, high crime, all high suicide rates, all of this stuff. And learning from those examples as we move forward, I think, is an absolute must, which is why I liked Jay Inslee. I liked his just transition plan with his Green New Deal kind of program, because it talked about just this. It talked about, as we shut down one industry, we move those workers into that next industry and give them good union jobs with good union wages, so they don't lose their standard of living.
Yeah, I would look. I mean, look, I like Jay Inslee a lot, and I think that's a well-intentioned plan, right? And in a macro, it's good because, yeah, you have to create new jobs. But what we have to think more about is the micro, right? So I like the Biden, Jennifer Granholm discussion a lot better about how we do place-based strategies, right? Where we look at the brownfields in the United States, and that's where we incentivize development, right? So because creating, 10,000 jobs in California doesn't replace the 800 that were lost in the Ohio River Valley last year, right? It's not that easy, especially now because you need two incomes to feed a family. So, if I lose my job and my wife is still a school teacher or she's a nurse in the local community, now I have a tough decision. Do we uproot and move and chase jobs? It used to be an easy decision back in the day, right? The coal plant shut down. Dad worked. They packed up the bags and they headed to Detroit and got a job in the auto plant, right? And they started their family, they moved their family, and it's just not that easy anymore. So that's a hard part. So what we like is a different concept, and what we've put forward, I wouldn't say it's completely different. I think it dovetails well with what Inslee was talking about and how we can put these things together. But what we like is a worker retention program, right? What it essentially does is it replaces the wages of these workers for a certain period of time and incentivizes the energy companies to keep these folks on payroll. They're union members. They have pensions. They have health care. So it's not just their wages that we're talking about here, right? So some of them are old enough that we can transition over into a full retirement of what they would have got 5 years from now. Some of them are younger folks, middle of their career folks that need to figure out what they're going to do. So keeping them on their payroll for about 5 years while they either transition inside the company and move into another sector. And it's even a complicated issue because the matrix of state regulations, some power companies who do generation aren't allowed to own their transmission lines, right? So there might be a growth in transmission, a need for power linemen, but that's not the same employer. But how do we take that time to train them, but keep them on pay where they can continue to drive their local economy and their economy doesn't fall apart in the process of the transition?
No, this is right in line with what I talk about with automation. There should be, a technology tax. There should be something that ensures that those people who are losing their jobs to automation, especially when you're talking about the truck driver jobs of the future that are going to go away. A lot of guys are in their 50s. You're not going to retrain them to be, computer programmers. That's not going to happen. But they shouldn't lose their standard of living. So there should be something in place to look, I'm not saying punish these companies, but make them responsible for what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it, right? I mean, there's tax money that can go in here too, right? I mean, we ought to be looking at it compounds really quickly. So the biggest job compounder in any community are the energy jobs, the power plant worker job, right? In a nuke plant, for instance, there are 10 jobs relying upon that one job in that community. That's the biggest multiplier of any measured industry. And they're also the highest wage and hour jobs that exist in our community. So I'm not talking about nuke, but coal's not far behind that, and natural gas isn't far behind that. And so if we just say it's about the worker and that worker deserves his pay, that's really not the whole story, right? Because it goes really quick from him or her to their family, to their community, to the other jobs, to their family, to their community. I watched Portsmouth, Ohio come apart at the seams over a matter of 6 or 7 years. It was just absolutely you couldn't find a parking spot downtown when I was a kid to the day I graduated from high school. There was barely a business open in downtown. And that was all because of those job losses.
Yeah,
and so we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be sensitive to that. And the place-based strategies are the solution. How do we take those new jobs and put them exactly where those industries were lost, not just sort of a macro vision of creating jobs over here means that this community somehow is made whole.
It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. And I'm sure as the weeks and months come along, we're going to have you back to talk about this, because this isn't going to go away. And I'm all in favor. I'm all in favor of making the workers whole. That should be our first starting point. Yeah, we want to address climate change. We want to address all of those other things. But at first, you got to make sure that the workers are whole and that they're taken care of. But Austin, I appreciate the time and the work that you guys do. I know you'll come back and share some more with us down the road.
Anytime, brother. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Austin Kaiser. Make sure you check out the website, ibew.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do just that. If you missed any of the interview, if you're just tuning in, grab the podcast. I'll take the program on the go wherever you go. The ricksmithshow.com is where you get it. Share it with your friends. Spread it around. All the good news. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.